We're often taught that leaders need to have these characteristics. They need to be the loudest. They need to yell at people to make sure things are done. And while there may be some merit to that, I don't think that's all there is. What I've come to learn is that leadership isn't about just being heard. It's about being there, being consistent, showing up for the people who rely on you, and just about the environment you create for them. So I've been in varsity robotics for the last 2 years now, and I joined as a brand new transfer student with zero connections within our program. And it was awkward enough starting as a new student, but add on to that, being thrown into the world of robotics, it was even more overwhelming. So I was initially nervous, but I found my footing. I was able to combine my past experience with new manufacturing techniques I was learning. And within the first 2 weeks, I was able to help assemble our team's drivetrains. I was also asking a lot of questions, making sure the leads knew who I was, especially as someone who was new, someone who was joining in 10th grade. I had a lot to live up to. I had a lot to catch up on. And I would also take on a lot of jobs that a lot of people would shy away from, whether it be organizing a team building activity during a difficult start to the build season, or planning dinner for 30 of us on some of the busiest nights of the year in cities with competitions with 60 teams. And honestly, I didn't have leadership in mind at the time. I didn't even have a title, but I just had a dedication and passion for the team, and I wanted to find a way to contribute. But looking back, that's really my first exposure to what leadership really is. Showing up for the people who rely on you, being someone they can depend on, showing up doing the work. And I think it really helped a lot. But our first competition was disastrous. Our our structure holding up all of our scoring mechanisms collapsed completely. And that's due to poor craftsmanship, unfortunately. We used rivets to secure everything, and just rivets. That is the same effect as having a sentence with 30 adverbs but no main verb. So we eventually had to shift to a defensive strategy to stay competitive, and that experience stuck with me. Luckily, I was able to turn this experience into a productive conversation with my team mentor, and we want to really get down to the bottom of what the issue was. And it all just came down to our leadership. Throughout the year, we had these leads who, a lot of them were appointed because they were there, but they weren't actually leading us. There was a major disconnect between the higher leadership and lower leadership. And for that, it was a bureaucratic nightmare because we were relying on leads who weren't leading us. And that showed me that just because you have a lead position, just because you have a title, it doesn't inherently make you a good lead. But fast forward to this year, the beginning of this year, I was appointed team captain for a much smaller, a brand new varsity team. And this team had two goals. It was to win and to develop leaders. So immediately I started trying to find a way to develop this environment. And we got off to a really rocky start initially because during the summer before that, I found out that our software lead, who we had planned for, he decided to leave to join our flagship varsity hire team. And I mean, I was kind of disappointed, but we also didn't have a replacement, so I had to get to work immediately on finding a new person. So instead of immediately going to look at everyone else, I did have people I talked to, but I went to go back to talk to that software lead. The good thing is I wasn't the person who he communicated that with, so I was able to go to him instead of as a captain trying to convince him to join the team. I was able to go to him as his friend and just see it from his point of view. And the thing is, he was very concerned about the workload that would come from being on both teams, and that's something I was struggling with too because I was on those same two teams. But the thing is, I had the experience of knowing that the software team on the higher team, they didn't get much work down below the leads. The leads would do most of the work because I'm a mechanical engineering kid. Software seems too easy. Um, so I was able to finally convince him to join, especially after ensuring him that as his lead, it was my job to make sure it was as easy for him to do his job as possible so that I would handle any conflicts as they arose. And that reinstated this point that leadership isn't about forcing decisions, it's about understanding people and meeting them where they are. But I'll admit I didn't do everything right this season. We go to the start of the season. The start of the season to our first competition, I was a nervous wreck. I was leading out of anxiety. I'd given up a lead position on our higher flagship team, like I just mentioned, to be on this, to be the captain for this team. And I felt like I had a lot to live up to. Not only was I trying to prove that I didn't give that role up for nothing, I was trying to prove to myself and everyone else that I was up for the challenge. So I tried to control everything, right? I created a lot of these forms, spreadsheets for people to fill, knowing damn well that they wouldn't fill it out because I know that, from my experience, I know that I would not have filled any of those out. But I was so focused and fixated on this perfect version of the team, and I was pushing for so much productivity that it was aimless, and I didn't wasn't thinking about how it was actually affecting the team. And it worked to a degree. We got stuff done. People were filling out the forms after I reminded them. But it was also a very unhealthy environment that I created. And I realized this when one day we were a week to our first competition, and my hardware lead was sick. And my team were trying to debate over who had to break the news to me. And that's when I realized something had to change. I realized that I had brought a really negative mindset to the team that was supposed to be developing leaders. So I shifted my approach. Instead of leading through pressure, I started leading through trust. I had a team after all. I wasn't just one person. So I started giving my team more ownership. I was able to step back and let them handle the work and just be secure that they had got it. We ended up going to our first competition and doing really well. We made it as a top 5 team, and we made it to playoffs as our alliance captains. And I remember distinctly, I remember going into the rain like 2 minutes after the qualifying rounds, after our performance, and just breathing the biggest sigh of relief and accomplishment. Because not only because of the result, but because my team had stepped up so well. I saw so many of them take initiative, ask me questions, and they were forcing me to be a better lead by making me take chances, like talking to other teams. And I think that also helped a lot with my communication, and for that, I'm forever grateful to them. And from that point on, our our team dynamic was really different. Instead of being really stressed, we were focused on being productive and fun. And despite any results, we were learning. We were able to grow as engineers and as people. And we were able to take these experiences and actually mentor our JV team to do that and do the same. And they actually improved so much from their first competition. And we were all really proud of that. But I was still part of that larger team, right? The flagship team. So I didn't have a lead position, as I mentioned, I gave that up. But this is where we learned that leadership doesn't come from a title, it comes from within, it comes from your actions. So I still showed up, I did the work. I had the highest attendance out of anyone there. I think it was 106 hours last I checked. And I was leading a small sub team to create a part under high pressure. It was a very minor part. It was a very small part and fairly easy to build, but it was because we were building around everyone else. And that's where I was able to communicate with everyone else about how do we want to build it. And we had issues with our leads, maybe yelling at us, but we were able to communicate with them as well. I was also taking on these other tasks. Like I mentioned, I take on tasks that a lot of people don't want to do. So this time I would take on tasks like running the pit or supporting the bot, building the bot in the pits as well. And I remember being incredibly sick during our first competition this season, but my experience is what helped me stay in the mindset to help. I was taking pictures, I was building the drivetrain back from scratch after it broke in 7 matches in, and I was also making sure our drive team were supported. And that's a lot of what leadership really is, just making sure your team is supported. And I think that experience was really important for me, just because I've shown you two different experiences, right? One without a title, the other with. I think what I've noticed is when people are given a title, they focus so hard on trying to live up to it that they abandon their values. Like I mentioned, I knew that people would not fill in those spreadsheets or the forms, but I did it anyway because I was so focused on being a good lead. And when I went back to my values, when I went back to using my experience for defense, like for example, we had our at our first competition, we actually had our bot go back into defense because we realized that our bot would not be effective otherwise. So I was able to use that experience, and that's the reason we did well. And the other thing is when people don't have a leadership title, they often don't think it's their responsibility, and they abandon any leadership position. They abandon any leadership qualities. So what I want to show you is that leadership doesn't come from a title. Leadership doesn't come from being the captain or the president. It comes from the actions that you take. It comes from being there, being consistent, and staying reliable. And that's something that I had to learn this year. So if there's any one thing I want you to take away from this talk, it's that leadership doesn't come from a title. It comes from your actions. But even if you don't have the title, you don't need to wait. You don't need to wait for that title to start taking action. Leadership isn't about a title, it's about what you do. Thank you.